What is up? And welcome to the Bet Chicago Sports Podcast. I am Shane Jackson. Excited to be here today. We got a great show ahead of tonight's Thursday night football matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. To help me break it down, I will have Joe Summers of BetSided to join in. He's a Kansas City native, writes a bunch of content for BetSided, and he has a good feel of how this game's going to go. So you'll want to stick for that. Basically, our goal for today's show is to come up with a way to bet this Chiefs-Chargers showdown, which is, again, slated to take place here in a few hours. But before that, obviously, this podcast is presented by Caesars Sportsbook. If you're watching this, the video version, easy to sign up for Caesars Sportsbook by scanning the QR code, and you can get a bet up to $12.50. And if you lose, you get your stake back. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, at a later date, plenty of articles that I've written on shawlocal.com/bet have the sign-up code within those articles. Just click on one of the top articles you see, click Caesars Sportsbook, boom, you can sign it up. Really easy. Would love if you can subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, all that stuff. We're on every social media at Bet Chicago Sports. Do that, sign up, or subscribe, comment when we're going live, all that stuff. Think that's really important, really helps the show. Still new on this show, but it's great when we have guests come on and give me important information so that we can bet this game with the viewers. And with that, let me bring on Joe Summers of BetSided. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. How's it going, man?
It's going well. Thanks so much for having me. I can't wait. Thursday night football has been circled for months and just can't wait to get into it. Hopefully make a little bit of money too.
Absolutely. And remind people where they can find you on Twitter.
So I am Summers on Twitter. And then every weekday you can find my content over on BetSided and the FanSided network.
Absolutely. And so one of the reasons why I wanted you on particularly today is because I recently saw you write an article about how people should bet Patrick Mahomes to win the MVP before it is too late. Catchy headline, by the way, as someone who also writes content. So made me click. And yeah, I just kind of wanted your opinion of this. You know, my first ever guest on this show a couple weeks ago, Nick Diaz, before the season started, when he predicted, awards and all that stuff, he said Patrick Mahomes to win the MVP at the time, a much better price than what it is now. But kind of what led to you deciding to write this article after week one and what you saw from Patrick Mahomes to justify kind of betting the price that is a little bit lower now?
Yeah. So I've looked at this whole summer. I've looked at it as the Patrick Mahomes revenge tour is about to start. The only test of his young career that he did not pass with flying colors was the AFC Championship collapse. And he's had all offseason hearing about how Herbert, Josh Allen, all these quarterbacks are surpassing him. He was number on the NFL top 100. And he had all that time to think of ways and stew on it to come out and set the league on fire once again. Even without Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes is the most dangerous quarterback in the league. And with Andy Reid calling the shots behind the best offensive line that he's ever played with and a much improved defense, the stars are just aligning for him. And a lot of folks were a bit worried about the Chiefs' schedule, particularly early on. But I think it just sets up the narrative even more perfectly because Mahomes just gets to go one by one, take down Herbert, take down Allen, take down Brady, take down Russell Wilson. And come October, that narrative already going to be done, and the MVP award might be sewn up. So I got him at plus 800 just a couple weeks ago, down to plus 600 now. And if the Chiefs win tonight, as the line is actually towards the Chiefs as we speak, then he's just going to continue to fall shorter and shorter. And especially with the idea of not having Tyreek Hill anymore, it's just so easy to craft the narrative that Mahomes has single-handedly carried the Chiefs to all these wins, and I think it's a shoe-in value for me.
Yeah, so I like it. Before the season, when I wrote about the MVP, I mentioned that this is a great award to bet throughout the year, right? Like narratives will fly like crazy, as you kind of alluded to, and I think these quarterbacks will see their values, climb and dip all the time this season. I mean, if Patrick Mahomes throws only 2 touchdowns tonight, maybe tomorrow's show and the Chargers win, tomorrow's show is about how the Chargers have figured out the Chiefs and they're the team to beat in the AFC West. Like these narratives happen all the time and offer chances to buy low on these quarterbacks as long as you're buying a quarterback and betting on a quarterback, I don't care what you do. Like I see people sometimes advocating for like a Justin Jefferson or a Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor or something like that. Those are dead money tickets. Earlier this week we had someone in Illinois bet $1,000 on Justin Fields to win the MVP. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But it's a way smarter bet than Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey. Like a quarterback is winning this award. A quarterback on a winning team is winning this award. And I think you can look for your spots throughout the season and try to determine when the best time is to buy it. And maybe it is now on Patrick Mahomes. Maybe it only gets better. Who is that for me to decide? But I did like your take of that.
I appreciate that. And I couldn't agree more on the quarterback thing. The only way that a running back or a wide receiver is going to win is if no quarterback has a standout year. But the quarterback talent in the league is just too deep right now. You can go all across the board, and there's so many guys that you can make an argument for. You'd need a cloth of injuries or something in order to have like a Jefferson win or someone along those lines.
Let's dive into tonight's game. Chiefs versus Chargers. Week 2 is kind of a dud, not going to lie. But this one should be good. We are bookended by the two best games probably on the slate with Thursday Night Football and Monday Night Football. Let's start with Thursday Night Football. Chiefs Chargers. How do you see this game when you approach this from a spread or total perspective? I mean, what stands out to you from a betting line perspective?
So honestly, I was a little bit worried about the Chiefs at -4. We typically play the Chargers really close. Justin Herbert's 5-1 against the spread in his career as a dog of 4 points or greater. It's down to 4.5 now, so it's moving in our favor. And I think the Keenan Allen injury looms large. But the big thing for me in this game is going to be how the Chiefs' offensive line responds to that defensive pressure from Bosa, from Khalil Mack, from the Chargers. Because in years past, when Mahomes has struggled against the Chargers, it's been because of the pressure, or there was the game where Tyreek Hill forgot how to catch the football for a while. Like, weird things have happened. So if the offensive line and Orlando Brown in particular can slow down Mack and give Mahomes time, I don't really see how the Chiefs don't just go out, score 35 plus and run away with it. The reason I like week 2 for the Chiefs in particular here is that Andy Reid's had all offseason to cook up something special for Los Angeles. And no disrespect to Arizona, but I think this is the game that the coaching staff has been focused on. And especially given, I mean, honestly, I wasn't particularly impressed with the Chargers last week. They beat the Raiders, nice, but it wasn't overly impressive. And Mahomes, with a much deeper receiver room, with a much greater depth in the running back position, we got a lot more tight ends now. There's just so much that Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy can utilize to give Mahomes, what he needs. Now, I will say, though, as far as the total is concerned, I'm thinking over personally. The Chiefs' first-round cornerback, Trent McDuffie, getting put on IR, leaves us perilously thin at the cornerback position. And so I anticipate Justin Herbert to score quite a bit as well. Mike Williams always crushes us. So I'm thinking a high-scoring game, but the Chiefs are too Mahomes too focused to let this opportunity slip away to make a statement on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, I don't disagree from the spread perspective. I obviously lean Chiefs as well. Don't feel great enough to bet it. I did bet the total. Sounds like we're going to disagree there because I took under 54.5 earlier in the week. It's now at 54 at Caesars Sportsbook. I do understand why people would be rushing to bet the over. You see Justin Herbert, you see Patrick Mahomes. You're like, okay, I'm going to root for points. I think there's an argument for that, obviously. But the Chargers, like you mentioned last week, they ran a lot on early downs. I think 23 early down runs, 26 early down passes. Lombardi mentioned in his presser afterwards that he got a little conservative against the Raiders, but I don't know. That's kind of who Lombardi's been at this point. Like, they don't necessarily put too much pressure on Justin Herbert, which doesn't make sense. Obviously, if you got a guy with his bazooka of an arm, you just let him throw. So I based off their style of play, I always feel like it's a little bit slower and less possessions than it always feels like it needs to be. And on the flip side, I mean, the Chiefs, obviously Patrick Mahomes, threw 5 touchdowns, could have had more last week, but the Cardinals ran in their personnel when they saw base, they ran way more single high than any other team. I mean, they had Simmons out there on the third wide receiver, and Patrick Mahomes just picked them apart. So I don't know. I feel like obviously the Chargers are going to use more too high look. Maybe the Chargers are a little bit more conservative than we expect. I don't know. Just a combination of the two. I feel like there's going to be less possessions than we're expecting. And so I lean under. Now, that could still be 52, 53 points. But I thought at the 54.5, that it was my play if I was going to take a spread or a total.
Well, the historical trends certainly would favor betting the under with a total this high on Thursday Night Football. And I definitely understand the argument for running the ball, keeping the ball out of Mahomes' hands. But it's a lot easier to run the ball when the other team can't score, has Derek Carr tossing 3 interceptions. When Mahomes is scoring every time he touches the ball, you could very quickly get into a position where you need to pass to keep up, which is what I'm hoping for with the over. And some of the props on the board as well. Like I saw that you both agreed on the Patrick Mahomes over 2.5 touchdown passes. I love that. I think Kelsey has a big game. Mike Williams always crushes us. I just think there's a little bit too much talent. So the historical trends do favor betting the under tonight. I just personally think that we're in store for more of a shootout.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be fine with it. I'm fine with losing a ticket on that and it being a shootout and watching the two of the best quarterbacks in the league go at it. That's where I wanted to go to next. Prop market. I think, a lot of these standalone games, these primetime games, people rush to bet like a spread or a total. Isn't necessarily necessary to do that. The prop market opens up a lot of different opportunities. Wanted to dive in there because we do agree. We both wrote an article, you for BetSided, me for Bet Chicago Sports. Same concept that we both took over 2.5 touchdown passes for Patrick Mahomes. At the time of my writing, it was plus 139 at Caesar Sportsbook, which I thought was a crazy number. It is now down to plus 105. I think there's a lot of people who echo our sentiment as well. What did you see from Patrick Mahomes, maybe week one, or his historical trends that pointed to this prop for you?
So I wrote in that piece for BetSided, we all know who Mr. October is. Well, Patrick Mahomes is Mr. September. In 14 career September games, he's thrown at least touchdown passes 12 times. He's averaging 3.3 touchdown passes per game in September with an 8.8% touchdown rate. That would easily be the best mark for a career. He just owns these moments. And the Chiefs have scored at least 30 points in 11 of those 14 games. So to get plus money on Mahomes to do something that he nearly always does, especially when you're talking about him facing an opponent in Herbert that people are clamoring to put above Mahomes, because Mahomes is a petty guy. Like you see it when he was holding up the 4 fingers and the 5. He wants to crush your soul and stick it in your face. And so I just don't see a scenario in which he's not throwing a ton of passes. And unless we're getting to the red zone and then Clyde runs it in for a touchdown instead of a pass, unless the Chargers somehow cause a lot of turnovers, I can't fathom a scenario in which Mahomes doesn't have plenty of opportunities to clear the number with ease. And I would even look at another prop of 3.5, especially if it's going to wind up being a tight, high-scoring game.
Yeah, this is a prop that I played multiple times last year. It's for me, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Like I know he does it about half the time, but as long as they offer it plus money, like I'm going to keep doing it. And they have to, right? It's 2.5 touchdowns. That's a lot, but he's Patrick Mahomes. Like you throw it out the window. And so he's done this a lot in his career. I think I counted back. I didn't count the 2017 game, but if you go from 2018 on, he's played 63 regular season games. 39 of those, he's thrown at least 3 touchdowns. So you're looking at 46%. The way the odds were at Caesar Sportsbook, it was an implied probability of 41. As long as it's that much of an edge or advantage for you, you got to do it. And yes, you're going to miss it maybe half the time, but it doesn't feel like it in a game like this when, like you said, he's got something maybe to prove, a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and the lights are the brightest. Home opener, Chargers, Thursday Night Football. Like it just makes too much sense. So I'm glad we were able to agree on something. I actually didn't know until like an hour before the show that we agreed on this, but the goal for this show was, hey, let's give it a bet for people to do before Thursday Night Football. And I think that's the clear winner. Over 2.5 touchdown passes for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and on that note, I want to give some love to Travis Kelsey as well. His receiving prop right now is set at 80.5 over at FanDuel. And over the last few years, he has destroyed the Chargers, especially now that he is the unquestioned focal point of the offense. I've got the stats pulled up here. Over his last 3 against the Chargers, Kelsey's got 385 yards and 3 touchdowns. Including the playoffs, he's scored in 7 straight games. So I think he's in store for a huge game as well. And I also like Juju to clear his 57.5. I don't know how you feel about those or about maybe one of the Chargers props, but I'm targeting all of those on my ticket.
No, that's a good way of attacking this game. As long, I mean, especially like you said, you mentioned that like you see 35 points for the Chiefs or something like that, like something crazy. Like when you had that strong of a narrative or strong of a belief in a game, you attack it all different angles, right? You just flood it with the
Mm-hmm.
props, and that way, if you win big, right? Like you throw as many bets as that, and you can cash that way. So no, I like that angle. For me, I did stick with Patrick Holmes prop, and then the total, and then there was one on FanDuel that was offered. It was both teams to score one touchdown in each half. It was like it opened earlier this week at like minus 117 or something like that. And every other book had it like over minus 150. So that's one I took. But between those three, I felt like that was enough for me. But I did understand the argument for maybe going over on some of those players' props.
Yeah, I might be loading up a little bit too much, but I'm pumped, man. It's been a long time. The last time we got to root for the Chiefs, we got crushed, and I think that's going to play into Mahomes' performance too, because the last time he played at GHA Field at Arrowhead was the collapse. So now he's got the home crowd and gets to help them forget about that, and I think he's going to do so in resounding fashion. And honestly, just for the sake of entertainment, I hope Herbert responds. And in particular, I'm targeting Mike Williams because he destroys us always, honestly. And so he's sitting at 68.5 that I'm looking at now. So I like him in this game. But just the two next quarterbacks besides Josh Allen and Joe Burrow facing off, there's just too many fireworks that could be in store that I have to target all of these props, it feels like. And got good weather in store, no rain, should be in good shape.
Yeah, and if there's any game to do it, it's the team that you root for in one of their biggest games of the year. So I don't hate the idea of loading up on your team, and just kind of with week 2 being kind of a dud, maybe you use most of your picks tonight and then save a couple for Sunday. So speaking of Sunday, let's close it out with some week 2 picks. I do know from reading one of your latest articles that we are going to disagree on what is a good bet on Sunday. Okay. Give me one of your favorite picks for Sunday, and I'm guessing it's the one you wrote in your best bets column.
So the best bets column, I took the Lions at minus 1.5. I really don't like Carson Wentz, and Detroit has been on a roll at home. They're 8-2 against the spread in their last 10 home games, covered in 5 straight. I'll admit that the DeAndre Swift didn't practice for a second straight day today. His injury scares me a little bit, but Amon-Ra St. Brown going on 6 consecutive games. If he can do it again this week with 8 catches and a touchdown, be an NFL record. That offensive line is good. I look at it as Carson Wentz the game away, and the Lions have enough pieces to be able to bring it home. So I'm on them. I'm assuming that's the one that you're disagreeing on.
Yep. Yeah. And so I'll chime in here. I get that argument completely, right? And anybody who's read or listened to my work at Bet Chicago Sports by now understands my maybe hatred is too strong a word, but I believe the market is too high on the Detroit Lions. And this is a case of that, I think, anyways. Now, it's close enough that it's almost a coin flip game. I could see it going either way. I'm not going to say, like, your bet can't win. But I took Commanders plus 2.5 earlier in the week. I took Commanders money line. My power ratings make Commanders a slight favorite on the road. And all your home trends make sense. Like, I get your argument. The reason why I would argue against that is all those trends were the Lions being the underdog, right? They were underdogs for 24 games in a row, all the way back to 2020. Mm-hmm. Now they're the betting favorite. And this is the first time since 2020. And it's a different animal. And it feels like the market is giving the Lions credit for their narrow loss to the Eagles more so than Washington's win over Jacksonville. And when you look at the look-ahead lines from the summer, Washington was favored by 2.5. So basically a complete flip from that. I don't know. I just disagree with that. I think the Lions, they scored their final 4 touchdowns, all 4 of them when they were trailing by double digits. So they were never really in that game after that pick 6 through the second quarter. It just felt like a lot of last year where Dan Campbell's team never gave up until the end. They covered the spread, but they never had a chance to win the game. And now you need them to win the game. And so I'm going to bet against that. Now, this is like the Commanders have like a 52% chance of winning or whatever it is in my mind, right? So it is very close to 50-50. I'm not here to say the Lions can't win the game. I'm just choosing to bet against it in a week where I don't feel that strongly about a lot of games. This is one that stood out above the rest.
And I think those are all really fair points. I guess if there's a quarterback that is going to take a lead and throw it away, it's going to be Carson Wentz. But
Absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
I agree, and especially with the Swift injury, it's becoming a little bit more dicey. There was one play I wanted to get into as well, real quick, was the Cardinal plus 5.5 or plus 198 against the Raiders. So the Cardinals, and I didn't realize this until I started diving into it. The Cardinals have won 6 straight games as road underdogs, covering the spread by an average of over 19 points per game in that stretch. And if you go back a couple years, they're 14, 3, and 2 against the spread in their last 19 in this spot, while the Raiders are 1 and 9 against the spread in their last 10 as a favorite. So I love the idea of buying low on Cardinals, even though I don't love the team long term. I just feel like Kansas City is going to make everyone look bad this year. Fingers crossed I'm not immediately wrong tonight. But I think we're overreacting a bit to that performance and giving the Raiders too much credit, basically, when I don't believe in Derek Carr still at all. So I love the Cardinals to cover this week as well.
No, and I also put them. I write a picks column every week. I wrote 4 picks up earlier this week, and the Commanders were one of them, at which I bet. And then Cardinals were on there as well. I haven't bet it yet, but I'm tempted to. It's one of those that I'm still torn about. I'm monitoring injury reports because they were way too injured last week to really stand a chance. And it's one of those things that, like, if they're a little bit healthier now, maybe I'm more likely to buy in. But this is definitely one of those games that not only do you take maybe the 5.5, but you mentioned the money line, or maybe you alt spread it where it's Cardinals minus 2.5 or minus 5.5. Like, extend this out a little bit, because if the Cardinals win, maybe they're winning big with that offense type of thing. And so I could see not only liking the spread, but maybe throwing a little bit, sprinkling around to make sure that, hey, they win and they win in a big way. Because I agree. Like, this line in the summer was Raiders -2, and now it's Raiders -5.5. Like, we might be overreacting in a week where I don't know if there was a lot of overreaction from a performance where Patrick Mahomes just reminded everyone he's the best quarterback in the NFL, and the Cardinals were banged up. So, I agree. I think that's a pretty good call. Were there any other picks?
Crazy.
Yeah. Oh.
No, I was going to say my crazy underdog money line parlay of the week was a Cardinals and a Titans at plus 350. The Bills are 1-6 against the spread against the AFC South in their last 7. Right, lost their last 3, failing to cover the spread by nearly 20 points a game. Titans have beaten them twice in a row, scoring 74 total points in that stretch. And I don't think that the Titans will win, but I think that this is the perfect time to say, oh, this team is terrible, and this team, the Bills, are amazing, and kind of zig when people are zagging. So I think there's some value there, and just threw it in a little lunch money parlay there. But I also, the last one I'll get to real quick is the Giants. I really like the Giants against Carolina. Carolina, they've lost 8 straight, didn't cover the spread in a single one, 2-13 against the spread in the last 15. And Brian Dable is going to run circles around Matt Rule from a coaching standpoint. And especially given the way Saquon looked and how Carolina gave up 217 rushing yards to the Browns, there's just too many factors in play here for me to not trust my instincts on that and go with the Giants as well.
Yeah, I didn't know you were going to pick that one. That is another one we disagree on, but this is great because this is why I bring on guests. I want, the best bettors in the world here are only hitting like 50-some% of their bets, right? And so it's great to learn things and maybe think about things through a different lens that I wasn't originally thinking about. So I enjoy you getting on and telling me a couple picks that you like that I bet against, and that's fine. Like, we'll figure out on Sunday what happens. But I took Panthers. I think this line when I took it was Panthers plus 2.5. But basically, both these teams played the same game last week, right? They both made a late charge, except for the Panthers lost and the Giants won. Giants won on a 2-point conversion at the end. Panthers, they lost on a walk-off field goal by the Browns, right? But there was a lot to like about late in the game from both of them. And I just ended up thinking it was too much value on the Panthers side of things that I took the plus 2.5. It just feels a little bit scary to ask Daniel Jones, hey, go win this game by a field goal and trust that. And so, a lot of the things that you pointed to about Carson Wentz, I was thinking that way about Daniel Jones. But also I thought Baker Mayfield played a little bit better down the stretch in that first game. And the Panthers really kind of let the Browns jump out to an early lead. They had a stupid pass interference early in the game. And so, I just think there are reasons that I took the Panthers earlier in the week, and I felt pretty good about it. But it's not one of those things on Sunday I'm going, I have Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield, money on them. I'm excited. I'm going to go 2-0. I have no idea, but I did think there was enough value in a week where there was a lot of landmines and I wasn't ready to step on them.
Yeah, and that's a game too. I'll admit Giants haven't exactly covered the spread a lot lately, but there is a trend that should have attention paid to it. The under in the last dozen Giants games is 11-0-1. And I know that the Panthers-Browns flew over the total last week, but 23 of those points were scored in the fourth quarter. The style that the Giants seem to want to play, especially being on Saquon, lends itself to a low-scoring game. So the under there is one that I'm taking a look at as well. Though it's pretty low, so maybe an alternate line parlay piece or something along those lines. But the trends certainly favor betting the under when the Giants are in New York.
Love it. This was great information here. Joe Summers of BetSided. This was terrific. Thank you so much for joining me. Hoping that we get fireworks tonight in Thursday Night Football and then Sunday Night Football. Hopefully win enough bets to enjoy the football that is being played because it could be pretty brutal during the afternoon. He's Joe Summers. I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you so much for listening to the Best Chicago Sports Podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with Sean Hammond to preview the Bears-Packers game on Sunday Night Football. See you then.